It's your boy, the Black Anglo-Saxon, and welcome back to From the Hood to the Hill. We got another one. Please hit the like button, share button. Please subscribe. I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're going to be talking about today the era of Black capitalism and Black ego. Because today we are having a discussion focused and centered around a conversation that was being had on the Joe Budden podcast as a result of the Jay-Z interview, and just basically everything that is happening and going on with inside of the society, these here, the United States of America, in terms of wealth calcification and the restructuring and reorganizing of how our labor is traded upon. And I think it's very, very important at this moment to kind of dispel some of the myths, dispel some of the things that we've given a lot of credence to that may have been true at one or another point in time within these here United States of America. But I'm gonna go ahead and jump into it by first starting off by saying that these here United States of America do not practice capitalism. This is not a nation of capitalism, laissez-faire, in the way that most people think that it is, and the way that most people operate it in. Because what we have to understand and what we have to be able to differentiate is that laissez-faire capitalism says that markets, ecosystems, environments adapt, thrive, and die on their own behest. And what that means is that you would not have certain terms like bailouts, subsidies, and all of these different additional concepts that go into what it means to have a central planning apparatus that basically inserts itself into each and every industry, whether that be entertainment, whether that be education, whether that be government, whether that be politics, whether that be food, whether that be health, whether that be the military, etc. The list goes on. All of these different companies, all of these different financial markets have been, or I won't say all, some of them have been bailed out at some point or another. And what that tells us is that that is not capitalism in its rawest form. There is a level of socialism that partakes and goes on within these here United States of America. And the myth is that we shouldn't do socialism, or that socialism is this boogeyman, when in reality, socialism already exists within a lot of different ways. The problem is that the central planning, because it has been co-opted by the bigger players, we see that the advantages and the leverage goes and recalcifies and reinforces the actual basically components, or I would say those behaviors that are detrimental, are pre-selected and actually allowed to perpetuate and permeate, and which is why we see, and I'll get into later, a lot of the different symptoms that we're seeing with the monetization and the commodifying every facet of human life, whether that be love and relationships, whether that be people working 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs just to make bare minimum, and how that labor is being devalued at the same time because of competing interests with not just inflation, but the devaluation of the dollar. And you must be able to separate those two things, because the devaluation of the dollar, though it looks like inflation because prices seem to be higher as a result of less spending power, inflation happens at a particular rate over time and cannot necessarily be stopped. Inflation is just a natural cycle of a particular financial system, right? And the devaluation of the dollar is different, but it looks like it operates and feels like inflation for the average person. But for those who play at the top, they understand the difference. And again, I'm just a regular guy, a regular dude, but I have seen people and been around people with money. They understand that's why it's necessary to have assets, because there's assets that they are trying to use to mitigate the damage to the dollar or the devaluation to the dollar and along with inflation. So they're trying to hedge that loss on the front end, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in the actual conversation that was being had by gentleman Mark Lamont Hill. And I don't know the other guys, but points were made and a lot of different things were discussed. So, what you all heard was a discussion about billionaires should exist, billionaires shouldn't exist. Why is it so wrong to be a billionaire? And the question is proposed that is it exploiting people or is it taking advantage of people to become a billionaire? And this is where I need people to be okay with accepting that something or a set of protocols can be set up in a particular way that produces outcomes. And I'm going to say it like this. The question is not whether something is right or wrong when we're talking about institutional protocol, when we're talking about playing the game, when we're talking about following a set of instructions. The question is not, is it right or wrong? The question is, how does it work? And what are the outcomes of it working in that particular way? The question is not, well, are billionaires bad or good? Why is it wrong? Because people ask that all of the time. Well, why is it so wrong, Devon, that billionaires exist? Or why is it wrong that people have amassed all of this wealth? Well, it's not that it's wrong in the sense of morality, because they get and they touch into morality. And this is not a conversation about morality. And I want that to be very, very clear. This is a conversation about how following a set of protocols leads us on a trajectory that produces said outcomes. Now, when he asks the question about billionaires working hard and that they should, in fact, exist. What this young gentleman does not understand is that when we talk about billionaires existing, there are not, you don't work hard to become a billionaire. You may work hard to become a 100,000aire or a millionaire, but once you reach that threshold, you are thrust into billionaire status by relationships, access, and the exploitation of supply chains, environment, ecosystems, and institutional leverage. What do I mean by that? Larry Ellison, the owner of Oracle, just used not his hard work, but his access and proximity to Trump to acquire TikTok and on the back end, acquired through Paramount Warner Brothers. And understand that Netflix was just shut down due to fear of antitrust protocols for the same deal that was on the table. It is not hard work that allowed Larry Ellison to come up on that transition and that transaction that catapults one into that type of money. It is access of, in this case, proximity to institutional power, right? Now, when we talk about access to environmental prowess, let's take the example of what we have right now with AI being bolstered up by getting subsidies from a centrally planned government to build data centers that are supposedly going to provide us a service to enable us to do better, be better, and experience all of these. Now, I'm going to address first this gentleman, his acquiescence, his there always be winners and losers, right? We're not talking about everything in its totality. And a lot of people do that to, as Mark Lamont Hill said, move away from the actual point. It's disingenuous. Because we understand that there will always be winners and losers. What the conversation is really about is the rate and scale of who's winning and who's losing and how they are winning and losing. The first false equivalency is the one of relevance, right? Or relativity, rather. You cannot compare a third world developing nation to a first world predominant world power. Our lives and quality of life is not supposed to be the same. It is the who of us to understand that. We need to be very vigilant of the black ego because that is the black ego creeping back up because it is right-wing talking points masked as empowerment. Well, look, it is what it is. We got to do what we got to do because it's always going to be winners and losers. Yeah, we know that some people ain't going to work hard. We know that some people ain't going to. But we talking about this, right? And I'm going to use this for an example. I already used the Larry Ellison example previously. So I'm going to go to another one, right? Because there's so many. Apple. Apple got sued, right? Because Apple was having black business or business workshops where they would bring these small creators in who would develop apps into their chambers. They would have these networking events, etc. What Apple was doing was taking the ideas from these smaller creators and implementing them because they had the network, they had the access, they had the resources, and more importantly, Apple had the legal mercenaries. They have a team and a fleet of legal mercenaries who are ready to enter a courtroom at any given time. And why that is important is because contracts are irrelevant if you do not have the money to go through the legal processes necessary for one to argue and advocate for your rights. They do not matter. There is no contract unless you can fight for the actual words and the language in it. So when Apple does that, they're leveraging everything that they have and have built through not hard work, access, resources, and compounding. Steve Jobs did not become Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs worked that much harder. Steve Jobs was in an environment where he was connected to people, access, and resources, and his father was also a man who had access to resources and networks that allowed him to flourish and drop out. There is a false equivalency in comparing your lived experience to that of a person who's across seas who we have actually, as a nation, pillaged upon and created their circumstance because it is a part of the larger game. Again, you're playing one game, black ego. There are like 2, 3, 4, 5 other games also being played that feed back into the one main game that is against your interests. So let's say you're right. How does it work? What does that do? What does it mean that capital, it's not greed? I mean, it's not capitalism, it's greed. Well, what you have to understand is that it's not greed, it's leverage. Person who is in business at that level understands that, which to Mark's point, I have to eat you. Big fish always eat little fish because you will become a threat to me. In Apple's case, I'm going to take your product. I'm going to take your service and use it as my own. Because the money that I get from that, well, I may have to pay you a little stipend, but I didn't take that pool of money and leverage that through lobbying, which then impacts and talks to and speaks to the very point that this gentleman brought up about, well, that's just the nature of how government gives all of these people the benefits. Yes, they give them the benefits because capitalism is set up in the way that it is, or American capitalism is set up in the way that it is. Because it says that, yes, once I extract, once I compound, once I calcify, yes, I am going to then add value to me and mine by making sure and pulling the levers of government to say that I'm going to continue to win because it is centralized planning. And what you all are understanding that Mark is trying to get you to understand is you're saying it's ideal. No, it's not ideal. What it is you're used to a certain way and you can't see it any other way. Because in other nations, look, communism, socialism, and capitalism, none of them are bad. All of them can be used for bad or good. These are ideological frameworks. They are vapid. They are only as useful and good as the wielders of them do so. The problem that we have is that we are in a perverse set of incentive structures. You will continue to pre-select for bad behavior. What do I mean by that? The politicians, everybody says, why are they so bad? Why are they so crazy? Because to be and rise in that arena, you are pre-selected based on how much of a sociopath you can be. You cannot be emotional because people will say you're not ready to rise. So what you do is you become the very demon that is needed and required to be. And the masses double down on it by saying, yes, he's ready. He has that killer instinct. He's willing to stomp out whatever. He's willing to tell the most egregious lies. And you wonder why that same person will say the hell with all of y'all. Because I have to get to a point to be at a certain level. I have to devalue not only you all, but myself. Because I know that it's wrong. I know that is not the right thing. I know that this is just how it works. There is a pre-selection because when you say play the game, you're talking about a script. You're talking about something that is already written. It is a pre-selection. So when you see a person come and rise, you have to understand that they were willing to do certain things to get to that level because the people who gatekeep that, who make you play a game to get to the next level, have said this person is ready. And how do you demonstrate that you are ready? You have to demonstrate certain behaviors, certain psychological proclivities. You have to be able to say that, you know what? These people are a spreadsheet. They are nothing more. You have to be able to pull triggers on things that most average people cannot. So when you get that, just be very clear that you have already, and you also acquiesce and pre-select based on that. So it's not greed, it's leverage, sir. People aren't greedy. People are doing what they think is quote unquote safe. Business likes safeness. Business likes consistency, redundancy, because why? They can plan in it. Central planning needs that. Central planning needs monotony. Central planning, yes, it is nimble and can be nimble, but it prefers redundancy. It's why they also want the human population to be redundant. Because one thing that I learned in undergrad, one thing that I learned in being in politics is that you can't control a million people, but you can control one. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? If you can have a million people, but if they all operate in the same ideological framework, you become one. You move as a block. You are predictable. It's why propaganda is necessary. It's why forcing people to go through certain channels is necessary. Because I have to force you into ideological homogeny. I don't care how diverse a staff looks in terms of their bodies, their colors, their genders. If you all think the same, there is no diversity. What was supposed to happen was that there was supposed to be diversity in all of those things because of how we experience. But when you're inside of these institutions, you realize that that is bred out of you. So we all get to a certain level, especially politically, those who stand beside me, we here. We here with it. We in lockstep. We fine tune. Which is why when y'all talk about Trump, I say it's not just him. You pre-selected him. And you will pre-select another like him. Y'all get so consumed with optics, red, blue, old, young, white, black, coochie, dingling, all of this other stuff. It don't matter. They think the same. They are operating on the same protocol. That is not about greed. It's about leverage and protection. Because once I do so many heathenish things, I understand that I better protect myself. Because if I did what I did to you and I know what I did to you, if I let up, that might be me. But y'all don't hear me. You don't hear me. Because the black ego says, I gotta do it by any means. You're not close enough. You don't understand that while you're playing that game that was created for you, there are 5, 6 other games that you're playing right into. And Jay-Z, again, said it. Kanye West said it. That's what that argument with Sway was about. You don't got the answer, Sway, because Sway is, why don't you do this? Or why don't you just, build your own? Because we're not talking about that. We're talking about scale. We're talking about access. We're talking about the ability to have true, real autonomy. Because, see, when you have to go through somebody else, they set the agenda. They set what you can and cannot say. They set what you can and cannot do. A lot of people in these spaces are compromised. And they are compromised not because of greed, because of leverage. Because that very piece that this young gentleman doesn't understand what he's talking about. It's not about just winners and losers. It's not about how somebody is living or what we think is supposed to be good. Yes, you're supposed to have a base quality of life when you're in a first world nation, when we're giving billions and billions of dollars to nations who have the very thing that we're asking for here in America. Imagine that. The nations who we're giving money to, subsidies to, through central planning, have the very services and needs that create a baseline quality of life that we here in America don't have. It's winners and losers of scale. You should not have to work 3, 4, and 5 jobs to make baseline. That's not a winner and loser conversation. Because over time, what you will find is you don't have anything to deplete from. That's why you can't run a nation. And I say this all the time. You cannot run a nation state like a corporation. Because corporations rarely factor in human capital. It rarely factors in agriculture. It rarely factors in ecosystem. It rarely factors in the whole environment. I'm talking about artificial as well as nature. You have to balance out all of those things. When you deplete natural resources that aren't naturally recurring and replenish themselves fast enough, we have a problem. So it's not greed. And you can't allow it to just run its course. Well, you can, but don't complain. And for people who love to acquiesce and say, well, that's just life, when it's your mother, your daughter, your sister, your father, your auntie, your cousin, don't say nothing. Because when we get to a point and you all do not understand the level of depravity that comes with that ideology of let's just do as thou wilt. Okay, okay, let's do as thou wilt. Because when times get hard, we gonna see who's okay with just chaos. We will see who's really okay. I don't want to hear, oh, well, no, people shouldn't be. No, because that's the outcome. Let's do this. The Hunger Games. May the odds ever be in your favor. Because that's essentially what you're saying. But the cognitive dissonance in the black ego is so steeped in this false meritocracy of capitalism that they don't understand that we've been fed BS. And this is not a conversation to tell people not to work hard. Work as hard as you can. I believe in it. I love stuff. You probably looking like, nigga, you got on AirPods Max, you got all this stuff. Da, 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 da. Yes, because I like stuff and I work hard. But at the same time, I'm not naive to not understand that there are multiple games being played on my head. And black capitalism is not the thing that's going to free us from this. Because people want to talk about black economics. That's central planning, fool. That is a form of socialism, fool. But y'all don't hear yourself. You don't interrogate your isms. Y'all so consumed with what right and wrong is versus how it works. And that's because we are politically immature as a nation. We have been governed by tyrants for so long. And the first tyrants are our mothers, our fathers, our parents. Because all y'all can think about, is it wrong? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it right? I had somebody ask me, Devon, well, why is it wrong that we have people who literally are running campaigns and they are dividing different demographics? I don't support it because what it does. Why do I need a campaign to say women for such and such, men for such and such, disenfranchised for such and such, trans for such and such? Because let's take and stick to blacks, right? Anything that's good for black women is good for black men and vice versa. But when you create a policy and you plop it into that infrastructure like that, and you plop it in there based on that narrative and based on that ideological framework, you are already reinforcing the ecosystem that it's in. Because when you say, okay, what policies are we going to do for women? The women who are engaging in that are asking for that based on their own singular experiences with womanhood, which is why they continue to not understand why you are unprotected, because you are getting policies based on your own individual womanhood. You're getting policies based on your own single motherhood. You are not having policies built to actually reinforce and change the trajectory of said circumstance because you did it in a vacuum. What you build on top of is just important as what you build. And it is killing, it's killing us. Because the black ego thinks that it can outrun a game that was created that we played. Part of the whole game was created for us to play. You can't outrun it. You think that the Larry Ellisons and the Robert Krafts of the world is going to let you in? No. They were at the parties with strange fruit. It just doesn't create leverage now. So they operate differently because it's not about greed. The Leviathan has to eat. It is an insatiable beast. It knows no appetite, which is why we see people continuing to have to commodify every facet of their life. People want to sit around and have conversations about why we have the relationship dynamics that we have in today's time. Because you have to commodify every facet of your life. So the whole relationship is transactional because we're trying to optimize every single piece. Trying to optimize your sleep, trying to optimize your food to the point where, again, they don't even put nutrients in the food so that we can't necessarily you can't have no revolution unhealthy. It's just gonna wait you out. War of attrition. You don't have enough nutrients in your body to wage it because of capitalism, untethered capitalism. And when I say untethered, no guardrails. It's not connected to anything that is tangible. No dollar, no gold, not oil, not nothing anymore. It's just pure imagination, which is why it is not. And the wealth inequality is growing at an exponential rate that is surpassing even medieval Europe. Shit that led to the French Revolution, people. The wealth inequality is so crazy. It is outpacing the very wealth inequality that led for people to flee Europe to come to the Americas. Come on, people. What are we talking about? We're surpassed that. It's not about winners and losers. It's about the calcification, the concentration, because you cannot fight it. Mister, it's not capitalism, it's greed. And you thought that was a flex. And this is why I hate that we have entertainers having conversations that are out of their wheelhouse. Not because it's right or wrong, not because they can't and shouldn't speak, not because they don't have opinions, but because it permeates. The same apparatus that you operate on is being weaponized against you unknowingly. You don't even know that you're doing it because intent doesn't have to be there. That's what you all don't understand. That's why is this person bad? Is that person? You don't have to be a bad person. You're operating within the ecosystem. And once you acquiesce, you are then Agent Smith. You then perpetuate and reinforce. It's why I have an issue with what Kanye is doing right now. You did all of that. And again, I'll eventually listen to the Bully album. I'm not saying that you shouldn't consume people for what it's worth. But will I ever listen to Kanye West about fighting the power? No, no. You are the power. That's obvious now. You did all of that and you went back to the same people who you said were predators, who you said be doing all this, who you said, you should never went to that island. That was you. But you with it now. And it's not right or wrong. Again, Jay-Z sold the drugs to his own mama. And then had the audacity to say that women and kids were off the table. No, they weren't. How many kids have consumed your music and destroyed their lives because of it? Because they wanted to follow in your footsteps. But you like to push that out of your mind. But that's a part of the cause. And just because you are not aware does not equate to non-existence. Just because you can't see it don't mean it's not there. If not for this camera, I wouldn't be able to fathom what's behind my head, but doesn't mean that it's not there. Just because you don't understand how capitalism is damaging, how wealth calcification is damaging, how insatiable of a ecosystem it creates is damaging, doesn't mean that it's not there. Mark Lamont Hill isn't talking about an ideal situation. What he's talking about is equalizing the situation, the environment. He's talking about homeostasis because even too much of a good thing is a bad thing. But you all don't get that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play this. So, again, it's not a matter of who is right or wrong, people. Because again, we understand that people are people. And the fact that people believe and think that you can't make money in other systems is a problem within itself. And again, we're not even talking about the whole system becoming a socialist system. Most people who make the argument are just talking about the necessities of life. You got to get the healthcare system off. They're giving us stuff that's killing us. We got to get the food industry off because, again, to the point that he was making, it's the consequence. It's the how. Because, again, yes, it'll make you more money making people addicted to your food. And I've used that example. So let's go to cons, right? People always tell me, oh, well, Devon, you should make shorter videos. You should do your videos this way. You should do your videos that way. And again, a person, I have been in and around it. So I understand the theory of making things shorter, snappier, more engaging, right? Because that's a school of thought. And unfortunately, the comms arena has created an environment where they have created the very people who they cannot now engage in any complex way. Because the human brain and body is built on habituation. And that's important because over time, which is why Facebook got sued and lost, over time, what happens is it's a compounding effect. People can't really deal with and address the problems that we're having as a society right now because everybody's only used to consuming stuff in 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And a lot of these conversations and a lot of these issues are 3-hour conversations, 4-hour conversations, week-long conversations. A lot of this stuff will bore your eyes out. And I mean bore them out. But you have to do it. But if all you've been trained to do is consume everything that's edgy, snappy, and highly engaging, they have trained you to operate more in your emotion than in your logic. And is that right or wrong? No, that's not the question that we're asking. It's how does that work and what's the cost of it? Because sometimes it is very appropriate to operate in that level of emotion because you get better results. But when we're talking about executive function and solving complex issues such as societal issues, especially when we're talking about as a whole collective that has a multi-ethnic, multi-diverse class structure, all of these different competing forces. Like I said, we got S corps, nonprofits, NGOs. We got a global infrastructure right now where we got national corporations who are operating in multi-different places over multi-different jurisdictions lines that have different rules, different governing bodies, all of these different things. So you have to understand all of that to even have an informed opinion, to be able to discuss it in a way where we're not just spinning our wheels, which is why y'all continue to have conversations about relationships and not really understand it. Because y'all still talking about 50-50 and living in the 1930s, 1940s, not understanding that we living in a global economy where America also is not at the peak of its economy or its economic power. We're on a downcline, and we might not be the central focus point for what is going to be the new global economy moving forward. So we have to be aware of all of those different things. But you can't do that in 30 seconds. And some of it is going to be boring. Is it? You can't say, oh, I want this to be more engaging. No, no. You got to sit through it. You got to be able to read that boring book. Because everybody say, oh, reading is just reading. If you read the magazine, you know that. No, 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 no. We live in a more complex society. See, that was good for back in the day with reading, just read to read, right? Nah, you got to pick up those bad, boring books. Because see, they're not going to put it in any book. They're going to put it in the boring ones. Because see, it used to be any book because it was easy. We couldn't read it all. But now they have become more crafty, so we got to get more crafty. That's how that works, right? But the problem is that the question keeps being asked, is it right or is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's not right. For example, right? And the elders are very bad at this because they do it all the time. I could tell they was abused. I can look at a picture, right? And I'll put it like this: 20 people in it. I know they know me. They know my intent, right? And I'm gonna bring it to DC. Killian McDuffie running for office. He has talked about baby bonds. As a political person, as a policy driven person, I know the difference between going to an event and somebody selling me their policies versus me having a discussion about policy. And what do I mean? I support baby bonds, but the current state of how it's written, I do not. What do I mean? Well, if you're going to sell me on the fact that somebody's going to have $7,000 at an 18-year lifespan, and we're dealing with the devaluation of the dollar, we're dealing with rapid inflation, we're dealing with the job labor force being reimagined, we're dealing with collegiate institutions being gutted in terms of their relevance as it relates to the job market. What does $7,000 do? And who gets the $7,000? Because if it is to address atrocities of the past, then we have to have also a conversation about who gets that. It can't just be all black and brown people, because all black and brown people did not enter into the ecosystem in the same way. Now, with that being said, they would hear this part, deem me as an adversary, and nobody around would be like, oh, you should bring that young boy, you should bring that black boy, you should bring that black man in cahoots, in commune to build. Because the black ego says he's a threat. Because I'm selling something and he's critiquing it. So you can't critique Jay-Z, you can't critique anybody without it being a threat. Which is why I say Charlie Kirk me. Because even though Charlie Kirk was an adversary, and white people do this a lot, they understand that people are not in full support. But I'm going to bring you in because of that. Because that strengthens, that ability to deconstruct strengthens the actual product, making the product that much more impervious to critique. It's why the government brings in hackers to hack their programs. Yes, hack it, please. Because now I get to see all of the weak points. But the black community, and again, I don't hate or have anything against it because I understand why it happens. Because we do deal with the level of scarcity. Everybody loves to talk about abundance, but we know scarcity is upon us. We know that there are only a certain amount of slots that the elites are willing to use to galvanize people. Like I said, that wrinkle that Jay-Z is talking about is weaponizing our social capital for the benefit of elites. Because I'm not even going to say white people. Because a whole nother conversation, they get played to. Played. And they starting to realize that they have also been played and used in the same way. Because again, when you go back to the formation, it was only about wealthy elites. Always has been. So capitalism, socialism, communism, none of them are bad. Proposition is that there needs to be a mixture, different ideological frameworks for different services, needs, and requirements. That's what has to happen. I don't want an all socialist society. I don't want an all capitalist society. And I don't want an all communist society. We can have different ones. And that is probably more functional because it gives us more the ability to be nimble. But that also requires our elders, the people who are shielding the system, to get out the way. The Jay-Z's of the world to get out the way, or at the very least, be quiet. And am I saying shut up and dribble? Yes, I am. Does that mean you can't have an opinion elsewhere or talk about it elsewhere? Sure, please. And what I'm also saying to the whole community is that can we stop listening to entertainer niggas about politics? Just because you can talk about politics don't mean you understand it and don't mean you know it, don't mean you comprehend it, don't mean you synthesize it, don't mean you work in it, don't mean you've been abused by it, don't mean your experiences are of it. Because guess what? I'm not going to challenge people who work in their profession. I'm not going to say I won't challenge them, but they are the experts. Lead. As the Black community, we have to get into a space where everybody play their part. Because you see it here in DC a lot. And this is how I know it is scarce. Because you'll have somebody say, oh, on one day, they're creative, right? But a grant come out for you a lawnmower technician. Now you a lawnmower technician. Then a grant come out for you a beatsmith. Now you a beatsmith. Don't come out for a carpenter. Now you a carpenter. And they take up so much space that nobody actually gets to develop. Because people will say, well, what's wrong with that, Devon? You can be. Not whether it's right or wrong. What's the outcome? How does that work? Where does that lead us? Where do we get to? Where does that get us doing that? That's the question. It's not right or wrong. It all depends about what you want to be the outcome. Again, I say it all the time. Y'all think Trump is a moron. It's pretty much a genius. Because a lot of y'all have not even thought about the fact that, yeah, he's going to disrupt the global economy, destroy the American economy, and a lot of things. But have you ever just stopped to ask yourself, like, maybe, what if that's his goal? Because he's never been in favor or talk good about America. Nothing that he's ever said has given me the inkling that he is in support of it. So what if that actually is his goal? Because if that's his goal, then it works. Y'all focused on right and wrong. Right or wrong is irrelevant here. We have reached the point where right or wrong is really irrelevant in America. Moral high ground is really irrelevant. How does it work? Does it get us to where we want to be? I make long videos because I ask myself, how do I get the people to where they want to be? You got to be willing to consume long discussions. So I typically don't care for short form for very specific reasons. I even upload long form videos on TikTok. People probably think I'm crazy. No, I do it for a very specific reason. Because I think, no, I don't think, I know that one of the problems that we're having as a society is that we are consuming too much short form content, especially on certain topics. But thank y'all for joining me. And if you have made it to the end of this long, 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 long diatribe, please subscribe, please share, and just watch more long form content and tell me what you think. I'm not above critique. I'm not above being wrong. I'm just telling y'all what's going on in the hood. But enjoy your happy resurrection Sunday. Thank you.